February 8th, 1932, half past midnight. The freezing winter wind whips through the streets of Manhattan, sharp like a knife, whistling past the dark. Closed shops on West 23rd Street, inside the London Chemist's drugstore at 314, right near the corner of 8th Avenue. The bright fluorescent lights create harsh shadows across the shiny linoleum floor. The clerk working the night shift, a man named George Scott, stands at the counter. Keeping himself busy by organizing bottles, he's thankful for the heat inside. Since the temperature outside is barely above freezing, the door swings open, a man steps inside, his heavy overcoat pulled tightly around him to block out the cold. He's young, just 23 years old, but his eyes seem old. Like he's seen and survived things that would break most people. His dark hair is combed back smooth. The popular style back then, he moves carefully, quietly, like an animal that knows it's being hunted. His eyes quickly scan the nearly empty store before he makes his way toward the phone booth tucked away in the back corner. But before we jump into this unbelievable true story, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. If you're a fan of detailed gangster stories that help you drift off to sleep or just pass the time, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Drop a like on this video if you're ready to hear the whole story of Mad Dog Coll. And stick around, because this tale has more surprising twists than any old noir film. Now let's get back to it. Vincent Coll squeezes himself into the small, narrow wooden phone booth. Its glass panels make him feel like he has some privacy, but it's really just an illusion. He puts a nickel into the slot and dials a number. The phone rings one time, then twice. Someone on the other end picks up. Vincent starts talking, his voice low and sounding desperate. He's on the phone with Oni Madden, the strong Irish mob boss who runs Hell's Kitchen. They're supposed to be talking about a truce, a way to stop all the crazy violence that's been tearing apart New York's criminal world for the last year. But Vincent Coll has no idea that this phone call, this exact conversation he's having right now, is actually a clever trap. Outside, a big, black limousine quietly pulls up and stops at the curb. 3 men climb out of the car, their breath forming little clouds in the freezing air. They move like they know exactly what they're doing and where they're going. One man stays by the car. The other 2 head straight for the drugstore entrance. Inside the phone booth, Vincent keeps talking. Having no clue what's about to happen, he moves his hands while he speaks, getting excited, maybe arguing, maybe begging for peace. Through the glass panels of the booth, he's perfectly visible, like a target sitting in a shooting gallery. The door to the drugstore opens once more. George Scott looks up from his work. A man wearing a long overcoat walks toward him, and as he passes by the counter, the man turns his head just a little and speaks in a quiet but very serious voice. "Keep calm and don't move." Then, the man's hand slips inside his coat. When his hand comes back out, it's holding a Thompson submachine gun, the famous Tommy gun, the weapon that came to define this whole era of gangster violence. In one smooth move, he raises the gun, points it at the phone booth about 20 feet away, and pulls the trigger. The noise is incredibly loud, a fast, popping sound that feels like it lasts forever. Rat dash, tat dash, tat dash, tat dash, tat. The glass panels of the phone booth shatter into millions of tiny pieces that glitter as they fall. Bullets rip through wood, metal, and flesh, not caring what they hit. The sound bounces off the walls of the drugstore, covering up every other noise, the phone ringing, the sound of broken glass hitting the floor, the screams that might have happened, but probably didn't, because death came way too fast for anyone to scream. Then, all of a sudden silence. The shooter lowers his weapon, calmly puts it back under his coat, and heads for the door as he walks past George Scott, who is standing completely still, his face white as a ghost. The gunman lifts a finger to his own lips. "She?" he says quietly. Behind him, the broken door of the phone booth slowly swings open on its bent and broken hinges. A body falls forward, landing on the drugstore floor with a heavy, dull thud. Blood spreads quickly across the white linoleum, dark and getting wider. The gunmen are already back inside the limousine before the first police sirens even start wailing in the distance. The car pulls away, turning north onto 8th Avenue, and vanishes into the Manhattan night. A police officer walking his beat, who heard the unmistakable sound of a machine gun, waves down a passing taxi and jumps in to chase after them. But the limousine is already long gone, swallowed up by the maze of city streets. Inside the London chemist's drugstore, Vincent Mad Dog Coll lies completely still in a growing puddle of his own blood. According to the New York Evening Post, the people who saw it happen later couldn't agree on how many shots were fired. Some said 15 bullets, others said 50. When the medical examiner finally gets a chance to do his job, he'll count up the damage: 3 bullets in the head, 3 in the chest, 1 in the stomach, and 8 more scattered through the arms and legs. They'll pull about 17 bullets total out of the body, with at least that many more that went straight through him, 23 years old. That's how long Vincent Coll lived, 23 years. Starting from a small stone house in the windy, lonely hills of County Donegal, Ireland, all the way to a bloody drugstore floor in Manhattan. 23 years filled with being poor, violence, big dreams, and terror. 23 years to turn into the most feared young gangster in all of America. And 23 years to make sure that pretty much everyone in the criminal world wanted him dead. This is how everything ended for Vincent Mad Dog Coll. But how did it all begin? How does a baby born in one of the poorest areas of Ireland turn into, just 2 decades later, a man so dangerous that Dutch Schultz, one of the most powerful mobsters in New York, puts a $50,000 reward on his head? How does a little boy who loses his mother at age 7 turn into a killer who even scares hardened criminals? How does an Irish immigrant kid from the Bronx become the man whose very nickname, Mad Dog, makes other gangsters, who are used to violence themselves, shake with fear? To really understand the end, we have to go back to the beginning, to a time way before the bullets, before the newspaper headlines, before the legend was born, to a cold, poor corner of Ireland where a baby boy took his very first breath, having no idea about the dark and dangerous road that was waiting for him up ahead. July 20th, 1908. Bunbig, Gweedore, County Donegal, Ireland. In the part of Ireland where everyone speaks Irish Gaelic, in the far northwest corner of the country, a baby is born. His parents name him Yunnan, which in English becomes Vincent Coll. He's the 7th child in a family that will eventually have 6 sons and 2 daughters. His father, Tullo Coll, who everyone calls Tall, works as a small farmer in this windy, beautiful, but terribly poor region of Donegal. Saying Gweedore was poor doesn't really capture what life was really like there in the early 1900s. This is a place of amazing natural beauty with dramatic coastlines, rocky hills, and skies that seem to go on forever. But beauty doesn't fill empty stomachs or keep kids warm when winter gets harsh. The land is poor, full of rocks, and almost impossible to farm well. Jobs just don't exist. People survive by farming just enough to feed themselves, fishing, and the money sent back home by relatives who've already left for America. Guidor's biggest business in 1908 is basically people leaving. For generations, the folks from this area have been packing up. They gather whatever little they own and get on ships heading to America, to Canada. Anywhere that seems like it might offer something more than the constant, crushing poverty of home. The big famine back in the 1840s had wiped out a huge part of Ireland's population. And after that, leaving the country became not just common, but something everyone expected. Kids grew up knowing that their future most likely lay on the other side of an ocean. Vincent's parents, Coll and Anne Mary Coll, whose last name before marrying was Duncan, originally came from Dublin, had themselves made this trip before. They had moved to Brooklyn, New York around 1890, met and got married there, and lived as part of the growing Irish immigrant community. But unlike a lot of others who stayed in America, the Colls had gone back to Ireland around 1894. They settled again in Bunbeg, trying to build a life in their homeland for 15 years. From 1894 to 1909, they tried their best. They had their 8 kids all together. They worked the poor land. They watched their neighbors pack up and leave, one after another, family after family, until sometimes it felt like whole villages were emptying out. The people who left scattered to Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Chicago. By the time Vincent is born, the Colls have already made up their minds. They're going back to America. Whatever hard times are waiting for them over there can't be worse than the never-ending, hopeless poverty of Guidor. At least in America, there are actual jobs. There are chances for a better life. There is hope. Vincent Coll's first few months of life are spent in that little stone house in Bunbeg, surrounded by his brothers and sisters. Hearing Irish Gaelic as his first language, breathing in the salty Atlantic air, having no clue that he'll never remember this place, that Ireland will end up being just a line on a birth certificate, a story his parents tell. A background that means less and less with every year he spends in America. In April 1909, when Vincent is only 8 months old, the Coll family gets on board the SS Columbia at the port of Derry. They travel in steerage, which is the cheapest way, packed in tight with hundreds of other immigrants down in the bottom of the ship. The trip across takes 9 days, 9 days of rough ocean. Tight spaces, barely any food. The constant smell of people packed together and getting sick. 9 days for the Coll family, Coll and Mary, and their 7 children, including baby Vincent, to say goodbye to Ireland and whatever life they might have had there. They arrive at the port of New York on April 12, 1909. Just like millions of people before them, they go through immigration processing. Their names are written down, sometimes spelled wrong. Questions are asked, and they answer. Doctors check them over. And then they're led out into America, into New York City, into their future. The Colls decide to live in the Bronx, in the Irish neighborhood that's become home to thousands of immigrants from the old country. But whatever hopes they carried across the ocean with them start to fall apart almost right away, because the hard truth that greets them is this: life in the Bronx is not really any better than life in Guidor. It's different, for sure. City life instead of country life. But being poor is being poor, whether it's dressed up in Irish wool clothes or American apartment rags. The Bronx in 1909 is like a boiling pot of immigrant struggle and desperation. Irish, Italian, Jewish, Polish, wave after wave of newcomers flooding into New York, all of them fighting for the same low-paying jobs, all of them crammed into the same run-down apartment buildings, all of them trying to claw their way up from the very bottom of American society. The Coll family moves into one of these apartment buildings. a place that stands for everything wrong with city housing in the industrial age. Lots of families share one building. The apartments are small, dark, and don't get much fresh air. Having running water is a big deal. Having hot running water is just a dream. Bathrooms are usually shared, sometimes even down the hall or outside in the courtyard. In the summer, the buildings turn into ovens, trapping the heat and the smell of too many people living in too little space. In the winter, the heating isn't enough, so kids huddle together to stay warm, their breath visible in the freezing cold air. The Colls live like this with 7 children. Toll finds whatever work he can, manual labor, construction, jobs that pay by the day and offer no security at all, no benefits, no future. And Mary does what mothers do in these tough situations. She stretches every single penny, mends every piece of clothes until it's falling apart, makes meals from whatever cheap food she can buy. Potatoes, cabbage, bread, maybe some meat if there's extra money. The street outside becomes young Vincent's playground and his school. The Bronx streets back then are full of life. Guys selling things from carts, horses pulling wagons. Kids everywhere, always lots of kids, dozens and dozens of them. Because families are big and apartments are tiny. And the streets are where everything happens. It's on these streets that Vincent and his brother Peter, who's just 1 year older, learn the real lessons of their childhood. Not the lessons taught in the Catholic schools they go to every once in a while, but the lessons of how to survive in a world that seems built to break them down. They learn that strong people take things from weak people. They learn that people in charge, teachers, priests, police officers, aren't always people you can trust. They learn that sticking together, fighting together, is sometimes the only way to make it through another day. The brothers run around the neighborhood in boy gangs, loose groups of kids who team up for protection in causing trouble. Stealing small stuff becomes normal, grabbing apples from a fruit cart, taking coins from an unattended newspaper stand, anything to get a little extra, to feel a little less powerless. Breaking windows, starting small fires, doing destructive things that are about being angry as much as having fun. The Catholic schools try to teach them to behave. Vincent is signed up at local parishes, but his time there is full of problems. He's a difficult kid. He talks back, gets angry fast, can't or won't follow the strict rules the nuns and priests enforce. He gets kicked out of one school, then another, then another. His real education is all over the place. And by the time he's a young teenager, it's pretty much over. But Vincent is learning plenty of other things. He's learning how the streets are organized. He's learning which street corners belong to which gangs. He's learning how to fight, how to run away fast, how to lie so people believe him. He's learning that in this world, this America that his parents came to looking for a better life, the rules are different from what they teach in church. Here, being tough matters more than being good. Here, making people scared of you can work better than making them love you. Here, violence is a language that everybody understands. February 1916, Vincent is 7 years old. His mother, and Mary Coll, dies from lobar pneumonia and just being worn down. The kind of thing they write on a death certificate that really means not eating enough, working too hard, being completely exhausted, the price of having too many kids, too little money, too much suffering. She's not old, she's just worn out, used up by the cruel machine of poverty for little Vincent. His mother dying is the first really terrible thing to happen. Whatever bit of stability there was in the Coll house, and there wasn't much, disappears completely. And Mary was the one holding the family together. Without her, Everything falls apart. Coll, the father, can't handle it. Or maybe it's more accurate to say he decides not to handle it. Faced with raising 8 kids alone while working whatever jobs he can find, he makes a decision that will hurt his children for the rest of their lives. He abandons them. It's not exactly clear when this happens. Different stories say different times, but the result is the same. Coll walks away from his family. He just disappears from their lives, leaving his children pretty much orphans. What happens next is a whole series of sad events that will shape Vincent Coll into the man he'll become. With no parents around, the kids are split up. Some go to live with relatives. Others, including Vincent and Peter, are sent to the Catholic Mission for homeless children on Staten Island. This is an institution, a place where kids with no parents are housed, given tiny amounts of food, taught some basic stuff, and prepared for whatever future society thinks is right for poor Irish immigrant kids. The mission isn't mean by the standards of that time, but it's cold and impersonal, like a factory. The kids sleep in big rooms with lots of beds. They follow strict schedules. They wear clothes the mission gives them. They eat meals the mission provides. Everything is scheduled, controlled, with no warmth or attention paid to them as individuals. For kids who have already lost their parents, this kind of place is another type of death. The death of being a kid, of feeling loved, of any sense that they matter as real people. Vincent and Peter spend 3 years at the mission. From about 1916 to 1919, 3 years during some of the most important times of their young lives. 3 years of growing harder, more angry, more bitter at a world that seems set on destroying them. But even this isn't the end of the terrible things that happen. By the time Vincent turns 12, 5 of his brothers and sisters have died. The cause is usually TB, pneumonia, the normal sicknesses of being poor that take so many kids in this era. One by one, Vincent's siblings disappear from his life. One by one, his family gets smaller. The number of poor kids who die in early 1900s New York is shocking. But numbers don't really capture what it means for a child to watch his brothers and sisters get sick and die. By the time Vincent leaves the mission and goes back to the Bronx as a young teenager, he has lost his mother. His father has left him behind. 5 of his siblings are dead, and he has spent 3 years in an institution. At age 12, he is basically alone in the world. Except for Peter and maybe 1 or 2 other siblings who survived, he has no money, no real education beyond being able to read a little, no future, no one who has ever bothered to plan anything for him. What he does have is anger, a huge ocean of it, deep and dark and dangerous. Anger at his father for leaving the family. Anger at a society that grinds up poor immigrant kids and spits out the leftovers. Anger at God, maybe, for taking his mother and siblings. Anger at how unfair everything is, the huge, crushing unfairness of being born poor in a rich country, of being born Irish in an America that doesn't want the Irish, of being born at all into a world that seems designed for suffering. This anger will fuel everything Vincent Coll does for the rest of his short life. It will make him not afraid of anything. Because what is there left to be scared of when you've already lost everything that matters? It will make him violent, because violence is the one thing that actually seems to make a difference. It will make him want things badly, because wanting things is the only way to fight back against a world that tried to make him nothing. And most dangerously of all, it will make him careless and wild. Because when you've been through what Vincent Coll has been through by age 12, the future stops being important. All that matters is right now. This moment, this chance to grab something, to take something, to be someone Vincent Coll, age 12. is ready to become a criminal. Honestly, at this point, what other choice is even open to him? At age 12, Vincent Coll officially starts his life of crime. His very first arrest is for carrying a gun. Already at this young age, he's armed and dangerous. It won't be his last arrest. By the time he's 23, he'll have been arrested about a dozen times, though actually convicting him of crimes will be harder to do. But arrest records only tell you part of the picture. The real story is about learning. Specifically, Vincent's education in the skills of being a criminal. When Vincent goes back to the Bronx after his time at the Mission, he heads straight for the street gangs that control the neighborhood. These aren't really gangs like we think of them today. They're more like loose groups of teenagers and young men who control certain blocks, run certain small illegal businesses, and spend a lot of their time fighting each other over territory and respect. The most famous of these gangs are the Gophers, an Irish-American street gang that's been around in New York since the late 1800s. By the 1920s, the Gophers are changing from a simple street gang into something more organized, a kind of pipeline that sends talented young criminals into the growing world of organized crime. Vincent joins the Gophers, and so does his brother Peter. Here they find something like a family, or at least the violent, messed up version of family that makes sense to boys who grew up the way they did. The Gophers give them a structure, a reason to get up in the morning, people to belong with. They also teach them things, not the kind of things taught in schools, but the kind that actually matter on the streets. Vincent learns how to fight properly, not the wild brawling of kids, but the planned violence of young men who understand that fighting isn't about being angry. It's about making sure you win. He learns the layout of crime in the Bronx, which blocks are run by which gangs, where the police usually go, where the easy targets are. He learns the business side of crime, how to sell stolen goods, how much to charge people for protection, how to split up the money. He learns the most important thing, how to be scared of the right things and not scared of the wrong things. And Vincent turns out to be a really great student. While a lot of gang members are happy to stay street thugs their whole lives, Vincent shows he wants more from the very beginning. He's not just in it for the daily excitement of stealing and fighting. He's watching, learning, paying attention to who actually has the real power, the real money, the real influence. The timing couldn't be better. Because just as Vincent is growing up in the criminal world, America hands gangsters the best gift they could ever have asked for. Prohibition, January 17, 1920. The 18th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution goes into effect, making it illegal to make, sell, or transport alcoholic drinks. Prohibition is supposed to be a moral mission, a way to make American society better by getting rid of the bad effects of alcohol. It's supported by churches, women's groups, and people who want to improve society. The amendment is a victory of hopes and ideas over what people actually do. But the reality is this: Americans like to drink. They've always liked to drink, and they're not going to stop just because the government tells them to. Within just months of Prohibition starting, a whole new business pops up to provide illegal alcohol. Rum runners sneak booze in from Canada and the Caribbean. Moonshiners set up hidden stills out in the countryside, and in cities like New York, criminal groups start making, distributing, and selling alcohol through a network of secret bars called speakeasies. The profits are absolutely huge. Before Prohibition, a criminal might make a pretty good living running protection rackets, illegal gambling, or prostitution. But bootlegging, the illegal alcohol trade, brings in money on a scale nobody ever imagined before. A barrel of beer that costs $3 to make can be sold for $50. Whiskey, gin, and other hard liquor sell for even higher prices. People can't get enough of it. The punishments for breaking the law are pretty light, and the profits are enormous for ambitious young criminals like Vincent Coll. Prohibition is a huge opportunity. The old criminal organizations are being rearranged around alcohol. New bosses are showing up, men who understand that bootlegging needs organization. Setup can violence, street gangs that can change. That can move from small-time stealing to organized distribution will do really well. Those that can't will be pushed aside. Vincent watches all this happening. He's 14, 15, 16 years old. Still too young to be a major player, but old enough to understand what's going on. The Gophers, his street gang, are also changing, moving from simple street crime into the more profitable bootlegging business. And through the Gophers, Vincent starts hearing about a man who will completely change his life, Oni Madden. Owen Oni Madden is already a legend in Hell's Kitchen by the early 1920s. He was born in England to Irish parents, raised in New York. Madden has been a gangster since he was a teenager. His nickname is The Killer, and he's earned it. People think he's been involved in lots of murders, though actually convicting him has been hard. By the time Prohibition starts, Madden controls the Gopher gang and is getting himself ready to take over the bootlegging business in Manhattan. More importantly for Vincent's future, Oni Madden is Irish. In the mix of different ethnic groups in New York crime, where Italian, Jewish, and Irish gangs are always competing and sometimes working together. Being from the same background matters. A young, ambitious Irish criminal looks to Irish bosses for chances to move up, for guidance, for protection. But Vincent's connection to the organized bootlegging world won't come through Oni Madden. At least not directly. Instead, Vincent's path into the big time comes through another rising star in the bootlegging world. A man who will become both his teacher and his enemy, Dutch Schultz. Arthur Simon Flegenheimer was born in the Bronx on August 6, 1901. That's 7 years before Vincent Coll. He was the son of German Jewish immigrants and grew up in the same kind of poverty that shaped Vincent's childhood. His father left the family when Arthur was young, leaving his mother to raise him and his sister alone. Arthur quit school in the 8th grade and started working odd jobs, then turned to crime. By the time he was 17, Arthur had already spent some time in prison for burglary when he got out. The other guys in his street gang started calling him Dutch Schultz. Supposedly, it was the name of an old-time Bronx gangster, used as a kind of honor title for tough guys who had proved themselves. The name stuck. Arthur Flegenheimer disappeared. Dutch Schultz was born. Dutch is everything Vincent Coll will later want to be. Ambitious, cruel, successful, and getting more powerful all the time. In the early 1920s, Dutch teams up with a man named Joey Noah, and together they build a bootlegging empire in the Bronx. They start small, one illegal drinking spot, then another, but they grow fast using a combination of business sense and brutal violence. The plan is simple. They go to bar owners and offer to supply them with beer and liquor. If they agree, great. If they refuse, Dutch and his men make it very clear what will happen. Beatings, setting fires, even worse. Most bar owners quickly figure out that cooperating is the smart thing to do. By the mid-1920s, Dutch Schultz has become the beer king of the Bronx. He controls speakeasies all over the borough and is bringing in millions of dollars. But being successful brings problems. Other gangs want a piece of his territory. Rivals try to push their way in. The competition is fierce and violent. Dutch needs enforcers, tough, Fearless men who can guard his shipments, scare his enemies, and when it's necessary, kill without thinking twice about it. He needs men who understand that in the bootlegging business, violence isn't personal. It's just part of the job. This is where Vincent Coll comes into the picture by the late 1920s. Vincent is in his late teens and early 20s. He's not that skinny little kid from the orphanage anymore. He's grown into a young man, and while he's not big and scary looking, average height, average build, there's something about him that makes him stand out. It's in his eyes, cold and empty, the eyes of someone who has seen way too much way too young, who has lost so much that he's not scared of losing anything else. When Vincent Coll looks at you, you understand right away that he's capable of absolutely anything. It's not that he wants to hurt you. It's that he honestly doesn't care whether he hurts you or not. Your life, your pain, your death, it's all the same to him. This quality, this complete lack of feeling for others or fear for himself, makes Vincent perfect for the job of enforcer. He gets recruited into Dutch Schultz's organization, probably through his connections in the Gophers, or through other young criminals, trying to make the same jump from street crime to organized bootlegging. He starts out as a guard on beer trucks, one of the most dangerous jobs in the business, because hijackings happen all the time. Rival gangs attack the trucks, trying to steal the valuable illegal alcohol. The guards are there to stop that, which means they have to be ready to shoot first and never ask questions. Vincent is great at this work. He's not scared to shoot. The violence doesn't bother him. In fact, he almost seems to like it, not in a mean, twisted way, but the way someone might like being good at their job. Violence is simply what he does, and he's really good at it. Dutch Schultz quickly notices how valuable Vincent is and gives him more responsibility. Vincent becomes one of Dutch's main enforcers, sent to deal with the toughest problems. A bar owner who won't buy Dutch's beer? Vincent pays them a visit. A rival trying to move into Dutch's territory? Vincent handles it? Someone stealing from Dutch? Vincent makes sure it never happens again. The stories from this time paint a picture of Vincent's methods. There's the famous incident with Joe Rock, who owns a speakeasy and stubbornly refuses to buy from Dutch Schultz. Dutch orders Vincent and some other gang members to teach Rock a lesson. They grab Rock, take him to a hidden place, and torture him for days. They beat him really badly. And according to some stories, though this detail is sometimes argued about, they take a cloth with gonorrhea germs on it and wrap it around his eyes, trying on purpose to make him go blind. Whether that specific detail is true or just something people added later, Joe Rock does go blind shortly after they let him go. His family pays $35,000 to get him back, which is an amazing amount of money in the late 1920s. After that, Dutch Schultz has almost no trouble getting bar owners to cooperate. Vincent is also involved in other brutal incidents. At age 19, he's charged with murdering Anthony Morello, a speakeasy owner, and Mary Smith, a dance hall hostess. The reason? They refused to sell Dutch Schultz's bootleg alcohol. The charges eventually get dropped, probably thanks to Dutch's influence. Paying off officials, scaring witnesses. The usual tricks that let gangsters literally get away with murder. By 1929, Vincent Coll has built a reputation as one of Dutch Schultz's most valuable and most terrifying enforcers. He's getting paid pretty well, not partner-level money, but way more than he could make any other way. He's respected, or at least feared. In the criminal underworld, he's proven himself over and over. But Vincent Coll is not happy. The problem starts with money. It always starts with money. Vincent thinks he's worth more than Dutch is paying him. And he's probably right. Dutch Schultz is making millions from his bootlegging empire, while his enforcers get paid wages, not a share of the profits. Vincent has watched Dutch get rich. He's risked his life dozens of times protecting Dutch's business. He's killed for Dutch. He's tortured for Dutch. And what does he get? Just a paycheck. But it's not only about money. It's also about respect, about status, about the basic question that drives all ambitious criminals. Why should I work for him? Why shouldn't I be the one in charge? Vincent starts to push the limits. In 1929, he pulls a robbery at the Sheffield Farms Dairy in the Bronx and gets away with $17,000 in cash. It's a good score, a professional job. But there's one problem. Vincent didn't ask Dutch Schultz if it was okay. He just went and did it, working on his own, keeping all the money for himself. When Dutch finds out, he's really angry. Not just because Vincent stole. Dutch doesn't really care about that. But because Vincent acted without permission, in a criminal organization, doing things without approval is like saying you don't respect the boss. It threatens the whole system, where everyone knows their place. Dutch confronts Vincent. This should be a moment where Vincent says he's sorry, where he apologizes. Vincent should understand that he's gone too far. He should back down. He should accept that Dutch is the boss. Instead, Vincent does the opposite. Instead of apologizing, he makes a demand. Make me an equal partner. Think about that for a minute. Vincent Coll, in his mid-20s, just a hired gun in Dutch Schultz's organization, looks at his boss, one of the most powerful and dangerous gangsters in New York, and demands to be made an equal partner. It's incredibly bold. It's insulting. It's completely unreasonable. It's also completely in character. Vincent Coll, orphaned at 7, left by his father, raised in institutions and on the streets, has learned one essential lesson. You take what you can get, and you never, ever just accept things the way they are. If you want more, you demand it. If they won't give it to you, you take it. Dutch Schultz's answer is simple. No. He's not going to make some mid-20s enforcer an equal partner. That's not how criminal organizations work. You earn your way up slowly. You show you're loyal over many years, and maybe, just maybe, you eventually get promoted to a position with real power. You don't just walk in and demand it. But Dutch saying no creates a problem, because Vincent Coll is not the type of person who accepts being told no. He's not the type to back down, to apologize, to make peace. He's spent his whole life fighting against people and systems that tried to keep him down. And he's not about to stop now, instead of backing down. Vincent makes a choice that will start the chain of events leading to his death just 3 years later. He decides to start his own gang. He's going to compete with Dutch Schultz. He's going to take over Dutch's territory, steal Dutch's business, kill Dutch's men, and if he gets the chance, he's going to kill Dutch himself. It's a crazy decision. Dutch Schultz has resources, connections, experience, money, and dozens of loyal men. Vincent has himself, his brother Peter, and whatever other criminals he can convince to join him. But Vincent has never been very good at figuring out the odds. He operates on anger and wanting more, not on logic. And so in January 1930, Vincent Coll officially breaks away from Dutch Schultz and forms his own gang. The war begins, January 1930. Vincent Coll is 21 years old and unemployed, or more accurately, he's working for himself in the business of organized crime. Starting your own gang when you have no money, no territory, and no reputation except as someone else's enforcer is almost impossible. It's like trying to start a business competing with a huge company like General Motors when all you have is a bicycle. But Vincent has three things going for him. First, he has his brother Peter. Peter Coll has followed Vincent through every part of their lives. From the orphanage to the streets to the gopher gang to working for Dutch Schultz. Peter is loyal, capable, and willing to do whatever Vincent asks. In the world Vincent lives in, that kind of loyalty is worth more than gold. Second, Vincent has a reputation. Even at 21, word has spread about him. He's the crazy one, the one who doesn't hesitate, the one who will walk into any situation, no matter how dangerous, and start shooting if that's what's needed. In a world full of tough guys, Vincent stands out as especially fearless or especially crazy. Both ideas are out there, and both are probably true. Third, and most importantly, Vincent has a plan. It's not a fancy plan, but it's bold. He's going to kidnap other gangsters and hold them for ransom money. This is brilliant in how simple it is. Most criminals go after regular people. They rob stores, steal from warehouses, threaten normal businesses. But Vincent realizes something important. Gangsters are rich, and gangsters can't go to the police. If you kidnap a normal businessman, his family calls the cops, the FBI gets involved. You're bringing down serious heat on yourself. But if you kidnap a gangster, he can't report it. He can't testify against you in court. And if he wants to stay alive, he'll pay whatever you're asking, because he knows you're serious about killing him if he doesn't. It's criminal business sense at its best. Find a group of people who need something, kidnapping victims who can't ask the law for help, and provide that service. Vincent starts looking for people to join him. He finds other young criminals willing to take a chance on his operation. Men who aren't happy with their current situations. Men who are hungry for a chance to make it big. Men who are just violent enough and just crazy enough to sign up for what is basically a suicide mission. Attacking other organized crime figures. Among his first recruits is Frank Giordano, sometimes spelled Giordana, who becomes one of Vincent's most trusted guys. There's also Dominic Fats McCarthy, another young tough guy looking to make a name for himself, and several others whose names show up here and there in old newspaper stories. Men who come and go in Vincent's group, sometimes staying, sometimes getting killed, sometimes just disappearing. By mid-1930, Vincent has put together a crew of about a dozen men. They're young, most in their early 20s, and they're desperate. This mix of youth and desperation makes them dangerous. They have nothing to lose, which means they're willing to take risks that more established gangsters would avoid. Vincent's first big operation is a kidnapping in early 1930. The details are unclear. Old newspaper stories from back then are often vague or say different things. But the pattern is set. Vincent and his men pick out a target. A bookie, a speakeasy owner, someone involved in the rackets who has money. They grab him off the street or from his home, keep him somewhere safe, and demand ransom. Sometimes the families pay quickly. Sometimes they drag out the negotiations. And sometimes, especially when the victims are themselves gangsters who think they can outsmart or outfight Vincent, things turn violent. Vincent's approach to these kidnappings is brutal. He's not interested in being gentle or kind. If a victim doesn't cooperate, Vincent beats him. If the family doesn't pay fast enough, Vincent starts sending body parts, maybe a finger, to show he means business. He's basically invented a business model that combines the idea of kidnapping with the tactics of gang warfare. The money starts coming in, not millions. Vincent's operation is too small for that, but enough. Enough to pay his crew. Enough to buy guns. enough to rent hidden apartments, enough to keep going. But Vincent isn't happy with just kidnapping random gangsters. He has a specific target in mind, someone he wants to hurt, someone he wants to destroy. Dutch Schultz. Dutch Schultz has not forgotten that Vincent Coll betrayed him. In Dutch's world, being disloyal is the worst sin there is. You don't leave the organization. You don't start your own operation competing with your old boss. That's not how it works. When Vincent first leaves, Dutch probably doesn't take him seriously. Vincent is young, doesn't have experience as a leader, and has no resources. Dutch probably expects Vincent to fail fast, to run out of money, get arrested, or get killed by one of the many other gangs operating in New York. But Vincent doesn't fail. Instead, he does really well. And more troubling for Dutch, Vincent starts going directly after Dutch's operations. Vincent's plan is simple and devastating. Destroy the ways Dutch makes money. He starts hijacking Dutch's beer trucks, stealing loads of illegal alcohol worth thousands of dollars. He goes to speakeasy owners who buy from Dutch and gives them a choice. Buy from me instead, or I'll burn your place down. He kills Dutch's men, not in fair fights, but in surprise attacks, drive-by shootings, sudden bursts of violence that leave bodies in the street and witnesses too scared to talk. Each attack costs Dutch money. More importantly, each attack hurts Dutch's reputation. In the bootlegging business, your reputation is everything. If other criminals think you can't protect your operations, if they think you're weak, they'll try to take what's yours. If speakeasy owners think you can't protect them, they'll stop buying from you. Dutch has to fight back. He can't let this newcomer, his former employee, destroy everything he's built, so Dutch starts his own attacks. He sends his men after Vincent. They track down Vincent's hidden apartments and raid them. They set up ambushes for Vincent's men. They kill anyone connected to the Coll gang that they can find. It turns into an all-out war with bodies dropping on both sides. But there's a problem. Vincent is really, really good at this. He's young, fast, unpredictable. He doesn't have an office to raid or a regular schedule to follow. He's always moving, never staying in one place long, always aware that everyone is hunting for him. And when Dutch's men do find him, Vincent turns out to be a better shooter than they expected. There are several shootouts during 1930 and early 1931. Cars speeding through Bronx streets, windows rolled down, Tommy guns blazing, men diving for cover behind parked cars, people on the street screaming and running. The kind of violence that seems like it belongs in movies, but was absolutely real in New York during Prohibition. In one famous incident, Vincent and some of his men run into Dutch's enforcers outside a speakeasy. Both groups start shooting at the same time. The shootout lasts less than a minute, just a fast exchange of bullets. And then both groups pull back. Somehow, even though dozens of shots are fired, nobody gets killed. But the message is clear. Neither side is giving up. Vincent also keeps up his kidnapping operations, and some of his targets are men connected to Dutch Schultz. This is especially insulting. Vincent is literally grabbing Dutch's associates and making Dutch look like he can't even protect his own people. One of these kidnappings targets Sherman Billingsley, a speakeasy owner. Vincent and his gang grab Billingsley, demand ransom, and eventually let him go after they get paid, years later. Billingsley will go on to start the famous Stork Club in Manhattan, but in 1931, he's just another victim of Vincent Coll's creative criminality. By mid-1931, the war between Vincent Coll and Dutch Schultz has become one of the most violent gang conflicts in New York. The police are worried, All this violence is bad for business, bad for the city's image, and could be dangerous for innocent people just going about their business. But the police also know that stopping gang wars is almost impossible. Gangsters don't file complaints, don't testify, don't help with investigations. The best the police can do is arrest people when they catch them in the act and hope the violence eventually burns itself out. But the violence isn't burning itself out. It's getting worse. And it's about to reach a terrible high point that will change everything. Summer in Harlem, 1931. The streets are crowded with people trying to escape the heat of their tiny apartments. Kids play on the sidewalks and in the streets. Vendors sell Italian ices and cold drinks. Life goes on even with the Great Depression, even with Prohibition, even with the gang wars that sometimes explode into violence. East 107th Street, between 1st and 2nd Avenues, is mostly an Italian neighborhood. The shops here are family businesses. Grocery stores, butcher shops, small restaurants. The apartment buildings are home to working-class families trying to get by in hard times. Vincent Coll has information that Joey Rao, one of Dutch Schultz's top enforcers, is going to be at a social club on this street. Rao is a valuable target. Killing him would be a major blow to Dutch's organization. Vincent puts together a team to do the hit. Himself, Frank Giordano, and at least one other gunman. They pile into a dark car and head to Harlem. It's late afternoon, around 4:30 p. The street is crowded. Kids are everywhere. It's summer vacation, and the sidewalks are their playground. Vincent's car drives slowly down East 107th Street. The men inside are looking through the crowds for Joey Rao. They spot him, or at least they think they do. Standing on the sidewalk near the entrance to a social club, he's talking to some other men. Vincent gives the order. The car stops, windows roll down, and the men inside open fire with a Thompson submachine gun. The noise is incredibly loud. The Tommy gun fires bullets at a rate of 600 rounds per minute. 10 bullets every second. The gunmen aim at Joey Rao and the men around him, pulling the trigger and moving the gun back and forth, trying to make sure they hit their target, but they don't just hit their target. The bullets spray everywhere. They hit the front of the building, shattering windows. They hit parked cars, and they hit people, lots of people, because the sidewalk is crowded with kids playing, mothers watching, people in the neighborhood going about their day. The shooting lasts only a few seconds, but in that short time, chaos breaks out. People scream and throw themselves to the ground for cover. Bodies fall to the pavement. The gunmen, having emptied their guns, roll up the windows, and the car speeds away, turning the corner and disappearing into New York traffic. Behind them, they leave a terrible scene. 5-year-old Michael Vengali is dead, killed instantly by a bullet to his chest. He was standing on the sidewalk playing with other kids when the shooting started. He never had a chance. 4 other children are wounded. Nicholas Bengivaga, age 4. Michael's little brother, Michael Amato, age 2. And 2 others, whose names appear in various newspaper stories. All of them are seriously hurt with bullets stuck in their small bodies. Several adults are also hit, including a man named Michael Rye, and others whose names fill the newspaper reports in the days that follow. The police arrive within minutes, then the ambulances. The street turns into a nightmare. People can be seen crying, children screaming, parents screaming, blood on the sidewalk, empty bullet casings everywhere, and Michael Vengali, age 5, lying dead in a pool of his own blood. The newspapers have a field day with the story. "Baby shot in gang vendetta," screams the headline in the New York Evening Post. "Child killed in gang shooting." declares the New York Times. Every paper in the city covers the story, and the coverage is all the same. This is an outrage. Gang violence is one thing. People in New York in 1931 are used to reading about gangsters killing each other. Dutch Schultz's men killed Vincent Coll's men. Vincent Coll's men killed Dutch Schultz's men. That's just how it is. Most people see it as criminals taking care of their own problems. And while it's technically against the law, it doesn't really upset the average person. But killing children, it crosses every line. It turns gang violence from a distant problem into a personal horror. Because if stray bullets can kill a 5-year-old on a Harlem street, then no child is safe. Your child could be next. The media coverage never lets up. Newspapers print photos of little Michael Vangali, a beautiful boy with dark curly hair. Now dead because of gang violence, they talk to his devastated parents. They show pictures of the other wounded children lying in hospital beds, bandaged and scared, and they focus all their anger on the man they believe is responsible, Vincent Coll. It's the New York Telegram that comes up with the nickname in their coverage of the shooting. They call Vincent Mad Dog Coll, a name that captures both his viciousness and his seeming lack of care for innocent lives. The name sticks. Within days, every newspaper in New York is using it. Vincent Mad Dog Coll becomes one of the most hated men in America. Mayor Jimmy Walker himself, who's no stranger to corruption and mob connections, makes a public statement condemning the violence. He calls the shooting a horrible, inhuman act and promises that the police will do everything they can to bring the killers to justice. The police commissioner announces that the whole department is focused on finding Mad Dog Coll, but there's a problem. Vincent Coll didn't actually do it, or more accurately, Vincent Coll didn't pull the trigger, and he probably didn't mean to kill children. The person who actually did the shooting was likely Frank Giordano, one of Vincent's gang members, who was aiming at Joey Rao and just sprayed bullets everywhere. Hitting innocent people, Vincent was in the car. Yes, he organized the hit, drove to the location, gave the order to shoot, but he didn't personally fire the gun that killed Michael Vangali. In a legal sense, this difference might matter. In practical terms, it doesn't. Vincent ordered the hit. Vincent's gang carried it out. Vincent is responsible. And more importantly, for Vincent's immediate survival. Everyone believes he did it. The newspapers say he did it. The police are hunting for him. Dutch Schultz certainly believes Vincent did it and is using the public anger as an excuse to step up his own attacks against Vincent. The streets of New York become incredibly dangerous for Vincent Coll. Every cop in the city is looking for him. Every rival gangster sees a chance to kill him and be called a hero. Even neutral gangsters who had no stake in the Coll-Schultz war now see Vincent as poison. Killing children is bad for business. It brings too much attention. It makes the police crack down hard. It threatens everyone's operations. Vincent goes into hiding. He moves from one hidden apartment to another, never staying anywhere more than a night or two. He grows a mustache to change how he looks. He stays away from his usual places. He talks to his remaining gang members through other people. But he doesn't run. He doesn't leave New York. He doesn't escape to another city or state. Even though he's the most wanted man in New York. Even though he knows that pretty much everyone wants him dead. Vincent stays and keeps operating. Why? Pride, maybe, or stubbornness, or simply the fact that he has nowhere else to go and no other way to survive. Vincent Coll is a criminal. It's all he knows. It's all he's ever known. Running would mean admitting he lost. And Vincent has never admitted losing in his life. Instead, he does something incredibly bold. He keeps up his kidnapping business while every cop in New York is hunting for him, while newspaper headlines scream for his capture, while Dutch Schultz has every gangster in the city looking to collect the reward Dutch has put on his head. Vincent Coll keeps grabbing people and asking for ransom. It's crazy. It's also, in a strange way, brilliant. Because Vincent understands something important. He needs money to survive. Money for hidden apartments. Money to pay his remaining gang members. Money for guns and bullets. Money for bribes and payoffs. Without money, he's finished. So, he keeps working, keeps kidnapping, keeps bringing in money. One of his targets during this time is Big Frenchy Demange, a major figure in the Harlem underworld and a friend of Oni Madden. Vincent and his men grab Demange off the street in broad daylight, hold him for several days, and demand $35,000 to let him go. Oni Madden negotiates them down to $25,000, which is paid. Demange is released, shaken but alive. This kidnapping is important for two reasons. First, it shows that even in the middle of the worst crisis of his life, Vincent is still functioning, still successfully pulling off operations. Second, it creates a connection, even if it's a hostile one, between Vincent and Oni Madden, the powerful Irish mobster who will play a key role in Vincent's death just a few months later. August 1931, the NYPD finally catches a break. Police detectives who have been working nonstop on the Vangali murder case get a tip about where Vincent is hiding. On August 1st, 1931, they raid an apartment where Vincent is staying. He's taken into custody without a fight, surrounded by armed detectives. Even Vincent knows that fighting back would be suicide. The arrest makes headlines all across the country. Mad Dog Coll captured. The newspapers announce there's a huge sense of relief from New York residents who have been scared by the gang violence. Vincent is charged with murdering 5-year-old Michael Vangali and with various other crimes related to the shooting. The district attorney says that the state will try to get the death penalty. This is a very important case, and the prosecutor wants to make an example out of Vincent Coll. There's just one problem: proving the case. The people who saw the shooting are mostly children and neighborhood residents who only got a quick look at the shooters. The car was moving. The shooting happened fast. Being sure it was Vincent is difficult. Plus, many of the witnesses are terrified. They know what happens to people who testify against gangsters. They end up dead. Several people who might have been witnesses suddenly have trouble remembering things or leave town. Vincent, understanding how serious his situation is, does something smart. He hires the best criminal defense lawyer in New York. Samuel Leibowitz is a legend. Born in Romania, brought to America as a child, educated at Cornell Law School. Leibowitz has built a reputation as the lawyer who can win cases that seem impossible to win. His specialty is getting guilty people found not guilty by finding holes in the prosecution's case, by attacking whether witnesses can be believed, by using every tiny technical problem in the legal system. Leibowitz has defended dozens of people accused of murder and has an amazing record. Of his first 140 murder trials, only one client has been put to death. He's expensive, $25,000 per case. A huge amount of money in 1931. But if you're facing the death penalty and you can afford him, Samuel Leibowitz is the lawyer you want. Where does Vincent get $25,000 to pay Leibowitz? The answer is almost certainly from his kidnapping operations. The timing works out. Vincent had just collected ransom from Big Frenchy Demange's kidnapping. That money, meant to fund his gang against Dutch Schultz, instead goes to keeping Vincent out of the electric chair. The trial begins in December 1931, and immediately becomes a huge media event every day. The courtroom is packed with people watching, reporters, and curious onlookers who want to see the famous Mad Dog Coll in person. What they see is a little surprising. Vincent doesn't look like a monster. He's young, just 23, and could pass for a clean-cut businessman in his suit and tie. He sits calmly at the defense table, listening to what's happening, occasionally leaning over to whisper to Leibowitz. To someone just watching, he looks like any other person on trial. Not the bloodthirsty killer the newspapers have made him out to be. Samuel Leibowitz puts on a brilliant defense. His plan is simple: create reasonable doubt. He attacks whether the witnesses can really be sure it was Vincent. Yes, several witnesses say they saw Vincent in the car that day. But did they really? They got a quick look at men in a moving car during a crazy, scary event. Is that enough to be certain beyond a reasonable doubt that it was Vincent Coll? Leibowitz brings in experts who talk about how unreliable eyewitness identification can be. Especially during traumatic events, he attacks how the evidence was handled. The police investigation was rushed. He argues, in their hurry to arrest anyone, for this horrible crime, did they really do thorough, careful work? Or did they take shortcuts, make assumptions, maybe even create evidence? He attacks the prosecution's timeline. Can they really prove Vincent was at the scene at the exact time of the shooting? What's their evidence besides possibly unreliable witness statements? Most importantly, Leibowitz paints Vincent as someone being used as a scapegoat. Yes, there was a terrible shooting. Yes, a child was killed. Yes, someone must be held responsible. But is Vincent Coll really the right person? Or is he just an easy target? A young gangster with a bad reputation whom the police can arrest to calm down public anger. The prosecution fights back hard. They bring witnesses who say they're sure it was Vincent. They present evidence of Vincent's gang activities. They show why he would want to do it. Joey Rao, the intended target, worked for Dutch Schultz, Vincent's enemy. They walk the jury through the crime from the planning to the carrying out to what happened after. But Leibowitz is better. He questions witnesses until they say things that don't match up. He finds tiny inconsistencies in what they say and uses them. He makes the jury question everything they've heard. The trial goes on for weeks. The jury takes 29 hours over 3 days to reach a decision, which shows just how divided they are. Finally, on December 28, 1931, the jury announces its verdict. Not guilty. The courtroom explodes. Some people cheer, thinking that justice has been done, that an innocent man has been set free. Others are furious. Sure that a guilty man has escaped punishment through legal tricks, Vincent Coll doesn't show much emotion. He shakes Samuel Leibowitz's hand, thanks him, and gets ready to walk out of the courthouse. A free man, but free in what way? Legally, yes, Vincent is free. The jury has found him not guilty. He can't be tried again for the same crime. In the eyes of the law, he is innocent of Michael Vangali's murder. But in every other way that matters, Vincent Coll is anything but free. The public is outraged by the verdict. Newspaper opinion pieces condemn the decision as a disgrace to justice. The Daily News runs a headline asking, "Is this justice?" with a photo of dead little Michael Vangali next to a photo of smiling Vincent Coll walking free. Parents all over New York are horrified that the man they believe killed a child is back on the streets. The police are furious. They know Vincent is guilty. They've seen the evidence. They've talked to witnesses. The fact that a clever lawyer got him off doesn't change what they know to be true. Police Commissioner Edward P. Mulroney makes a public statement promising that even though the trial is over, the NYPD will keep watching Vincent Coll and will arrest him for any crime they can prove he did. Dutch Schultz is absolutely furious. During the months Vincent was in jail and on trial, Dutch has had a break from their gang war. Now Vincent is free again, which means the violence will start back up. Plus, the not guilty verdict is an embarrassment for Dutch. His enemy has escaped justice. He's been set free despite Dutch's best efforts to make sure he was convicted. Dutch's response is to increase the reward on Vincent's head. Different stories give different amounts, but the most common number mentioned is $50,000. An unbelievable amount in 1931, equal to nearly $1 million today. $50,000 to whoever kills Vincent Coll. Think about what that means. Every gangster, every hitman, every desperate criminal in New York suddenly has a huge financial reason to murder Vincent. For $50,000, people who have nothing to do with the Schultz-Coll war, people who don't even know Vincent personally, are now hunting him. And it's not just Dutch Schultz offering money. Other mob bosses, tired of the violence and the police attention that Vincent's war has brought, are also putting up money. Some stories suggest that the total reward, combining money from several sources, may have been as high as $100,000. Vincent is now living in a nightmare. He can't trust anyone. Every person he passes on the street could be planning to kill him for the money. Every car that slows down near him could be full of gunmen. Every knock on a door could be his last. To make things even worse, Vincent's gang is falling apart. Some of his men have been arrested. Others have been killed. Still others have simply left him, realizing that Vincent is now too dangerous to be around. The reward on Vincent's head also applies to anyone with him. Anyone seen with him becomes a target themselves. His brother Peter, his closest friend and most loyal supporter, is killed on May 2nd, 1931, before Vincent's trial even starts. Peter is shot multiple times in a Bronx apartment, almost certainly by Dutch Schultz's men. Vincent loses not just a friend, but his last real family member. After Peter's death, Vincent is truly alone. Somehow, even with all this, Vincent keeps operating. He keeps up his kidnapping schemes, keeps bringing in money, keeps surviving. It's really amazing. Most people in his situation would have run away from the city, left the criminal life, gone into hiding somewhere safe. But Vincent Coll doesn't run. He doubles down. The time from January to February 1932, from Vincent's acquittal to his death, represents the final part of his life. These 2 months are a perfect example of constant fear, desperation, and stubborn refusal to accept defeat. Vincent is always on the move. He almost never sleeps in the same place twice. He uses different names, changes how he looks, stays away from places he used to go. He communicates with what's left of his gang through other people and coded messages. Every action is planned to avoid being found. But he also needs money. Hiding isn't free. Hidden apartments cost money, bribes cost money, guns and bullets cost money. Just staying alive costs money. So Vincent keeps up his kidnapping operations. One of his last big operations is the kidnapping of the racketeer Charlie Gordon. Vincent and what's left of his gang grab Gordon, hold him for ransom, and eventually collect $20,000 to let him go. It's a successful operation, done professionally, showing that even in the worst circumstances, Vincent still has the ability to carry out organized crime. But each operation is also a risk. Every time Vincent shows himself to commit a crime, he makes himself visible to the hundreds of people hunting him. And with each passing day, the stress must be overwhelming. Vincent also gets married during this time. His bride is Lala Schwartzbart. A young woman who apparently fell in love with Vincent, even though, or maybe because he was so famous. They get married in January 1932, just weeks before he dies. What must that marriage have been like? Imagine being newly married when one of you is the most wanted criminal in New York, when almost everyone in the criminal world wants you dead, when you can't stay in one place for more than a night or two. Imagine trying to build a life together under those conditions. Lala apparently knew what she was getting into. She had been involved with Vincent before his arrest, had visited him in jail, had stood by him during his trial. Now, as his wife, she shares his life on the run. They move from hotel to hotel, apartment to apartment, always looking over their shoulders, always ready to run, even with the constant danger. Vincent seems to keep his bold attitude. He's seen in public, sometimes at restaurants, at nightclubs, always surrounded by bodyguards, always watching, but not hiding completely. It's like he wants people to know that he's still here, still working, still not beaten. This bold attitude might be partly on purpose. In the criminal world, showing fear is a sign of weakness, and weakness gets you killed. Vincent needs to show he's still strong, needs to convince people that he's still dangerous, still someone to be scared of rather than someone to ignore. But the bold attitude might also be the only mental defense Vincent has left. If he lets himself really understand his situation, that he's basically marked for death, that his survival is measured in days or weeks at most, that there's no real way out of this, the hopelessness might be too much to handle. Better to keep moving, keep active, keep aggressive, and not think too carefully about what's coming. Early February 1932, Vincent is running out of options. The gang war with Dutch Schultz has cost him most of his men, his territory, the ways he makes money. The reward on his head means he can't find new people to join him. No one wants to be connected to someone who's as good as dead. His kidnapping operations, while sometimes successful, are becoming harder to pull off as possible victims increase their security and the police watch for his usual methods. Vincent needs to end the war. He needs peace, or at least a truce. And there's only one way to get that. Negotiate with people powerful enough to make Dutch Schultz back off. Enter Oni Madden. Oni Madden, the same man whose friend, Big Frenchy Demange, Vincent had kidnapped months earlier, is one of the most powerful mobsters in New York. Madden runs bootlegging operations in Hell's Kitchen and has connections throughout the city's criminal world. More importantly, Madden has influence with Dutch Schultz. They're not exactly friends, but they work in areas that overlap and have business interests together. If anyone can arrange a peace between Vincent and Dutch, it's Oni Madden. Exactly how Vincent and Madden get in touch with each other isn't clear. Some stories say Vincent reached out first, desperate for any way to end the war. Others say Madden's people made contact, offering to help arrange a meeting. Still others say it was a trick from the beginning, that Madden, tired of the violence and the attention it was bringing, had decided Vincent needed to die and was willing to help make it happen. What is clear is that by early February, Vincent believes he's going to meet with Madden's representatives to talk about peace terms. He believes that Madden, as someone neutral, can convince Dutch to call off the war if Vincent agrees to certain compromises. Maybe paying compensation, maybe leaving New York, maybe just agreeing to stay out of Dutch's territories. Vincent should be suspicious. He should realize that walking into any meeting at this point is incredibly dangerous. But maybe he's out of options. Maybe he's desperate enough to take the risk. Maybe he honestly believes that Madden, as a fellow Irishman and as a businessman, will see the value in ending a war that's costing everyone money and bringing too much police attention. Whatever he's thinking, Vincent agrees to a meeting. Vincent Coll wakes up on February 8, 1932, with no idea that he has about 16 hours left to live. He's staying in an apartment in Midtown Manhattan with his wife, Lele, and at least one bodyguard. The location is secret. Even most of his remaining gang members don't know where he is. But somehow, someone knows or will know soon enough. What does Vincent do during his last day? The historical records are frustratingly incomplete. There are no detailed stories of how he spent those final hours. No diary entries, no interviews with people who saw him before he died. But we can guess some of it. Vincent probably wakes up late in the morning. Gangsters don't usually get up early. He eats breakfast, he reads the newspapers. Gangsters always read the newspapers, checking to see if there's any mention of themselves, their operations, their enemies. Maybe he sees articles about other crimes, other gangsters. Maybe he wonders if his name will be in tomorrow's papers. He probably meets with some of his remaining associates. There are operations to plan, money to collect, schemes to talk about. Even in the final days of his life, Vincent is working, planning, trying to rebuild his empire. At some point during the day, Vincent gets word that the meeting with Oni Madden's representatives is set for that evening. The location, a phone conversation. Vincent is supposed to call a specific number at a specific time, and Madden's people will be on the other end to discuss terms. This makes sense from Vincent's point of view. A phone call is safer than meeting in person. He can make the call from a public phone booth, which reduces the risk of being trapped. If anything seems wrong during the conversation, he can just hang up and walk away. What Vincent doesn't know is that this phone call is a trap. The people he'll be calling aren't interested in negotiating. They're interested in knowing his exact location at an exact time. Evening comes. Vincent tells Lala he'll be back in a few hours. He takes one of his bodyguards and heads out into the cold Manhattan night. It's late, nearly midnight, but the city never sleeps. There are still people on the streets. Still cars passing by, still life happening all around. Vincent and his bodyguard walk through the streets on the west side, checking to see if anyone is following them, watching for anything suspicious. Vincent is constantly looking over his shoulder. He has to be, but he's also hopeful. Maybe this is it. Maybe this is the way out of the nightmare his life has become. Maybe, just maybe, he can negotiate his way back to something like a normal criminal career. They reach West 23rd Street. There's a drugstore here. The London Chemist, that's still open late. Drugstores often stayed open late in this time, selling not just medicine, but also basic items. And importantly, for Vincent's purposes, they had phone booths, 12:25 a.m., February 9th, 1932, technically just after midnight. So some stories date this February 9th, even though it's a continuation of Vincent's February 8th. Vincent enters the London Chemist's drugstore at 314 West 23rd Street. The night clerk, George Scott, looks up from behind the counter. He sees a young man in an overcoat, just another customer on a cold winter night. Vincent's bodyguard stays near the entrance, positioned to watch the door and the street outside. This is standard procedure. When Vincent makes himself vulnerable by making a phone call, someone needs to watch his back. Vincent walks to the back of the store where a wooden phone booth stands in the corner. These phone booths were common in businesses back then. Enclosed wooden structures with glass panels, offering a little bit of privacy for phone calls. There's a small seat inside, a telephone mounted on the wall, and a slot for coins. Vincent slides into the booth. The door closes behind him with a soft click. He's now enclosed in a space roughly 3 feet by 3 feet, about the size of a coffin, though that comparison probably doesn't occur to him. He drops a nickel into the slot and dials. The number he's calling is supposedly connected to Oni Madden's organization. On the other end, someone answers. We don't know what the conversation is about. No recording exists. No one ever wrote down what was said. The people on the other end certainly aren't going to tell the police what they discussed. And Vincent, of course, won't live long enough to tell anyone, but we can guess. Vincent is probably talking about terms for a truce. What would it take for Dutch Schultz to call off the war? Money? Territory? Vincent leaving New York? The conversation is probably tense, but professional. These are businessmen discussing business, even if that business involves murder. What Vincent doesn't realize is that the phone call has a second purpose. The people on the other end aren't just negotiating. They're stalling. They're keeping Vincent on the line, keeping him in one place, keeping him in that phone booth long enough for the killers to arrive. Because at this very moment, a car is racing toward West 23rd Street. Inside are at least 3 men, one of whom is carrying a Thompson submachine gun. They know exactly where Vincent is. They know he's in a phone booth in the London chemist's drugstore. They know he's vulnerable, exposed, trapped. Did Oni Madden order the killing? Was it Dutch Schultz's men who got word of Vincent's location? Or was it some combination? Multiple parties working together to make sure Mad Dog Coll finally got what was coming to him. Historians disagree. Some believe Madden set up the killing himself, tired of Vincent's troublemaking violence and willing to remove the problem. Others believe that Madden's organization told Dutch Schultz's men where Vincent would be, letting them do the actual killing. Still others suggest that the police might have been involved, looking the other way to let gangsters solve their own problems. What's clear is that multiple people had reasons, the means and the chance, and on this cold February night, all the pieces have come together. Vincent keeps talking on the phone. Not knowing what's happening, his bodyguard, positioned near the front of the store, is watching the door. But maybe is also getting comfortable. Maybe is letting his guard down a little, because nothing has happened yet, and it's late and cold, and he's tired. Outside, a big black limousine pulls up to the curb. 3 men get out. 1 stays with the car, keeping the engine running. 2 walk toward the drugstore entrance. They're dressed in long overcoats, normal clothes for the time, but also useful for hiding weapons. They move with purpose, but not panic. This is a professional killing, not a crime of anger. They know what they're doing. George Scott, the night clerk, is the first to realize something is wrong. The door opens and 2 men enter. There's something about them. Maybe the way they move, maybe the look in their eyes, maybe just the instinct you develop from working late nights in a city full of criminals. Scott knows immediately that these men are dangerous. One of the men approaches the counter. He makes eye contact with Scott, and he says quietly, but with complete authority, "Keep cool, fella." It's not a suggestion. It's an order, and Scott, understanding perfectly what will happen if he doesn't obey, freezes in place. The man's hand moves inside his coat. When it comes back out, he's holding a Thompson submachine gun, the famous weapon of the gangster era, capable of firing 600 rounds per minute, devastating at close range. Impossible to mistake for anything other than what it is. A killing machine. The gunman raises the weapon smoothly. Like a professional, he aims at the phone booth in the back corner, at the figure visible through the glass panels, at Vincent Coll, who is still talking on the phone, still unaware, still believing he's safe. Vincent's bodyguard near the front of the store finally realizes what's happening. He reaches for his own gun, but it's too late. Way too late. The gunman squeezes the trigger. The sound is incredibly loud in the small space of the drugstore. Rat-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat. The Thompson submachine gun lives up to its reputation, spitting out bullets with machine-like efficiency. The glass panels of the phone booth explode into tiny pieces. The wood splinters. Bullets tear through everything: glass, wood, metal, and flesh. Vincent Coll, trapped in the phone booth with nowhere to hide and no time to run, is hit many times. His body jerks as bullets hit him in the head. Chest, stomach, arms, legs. Blood sprays across the inside of the phone booth. Across the walls, across the floor. The gunman doesn't fire just a few shots. He empties the drum magazine, 50 rounds total. Though not all of them hit Vincent. Some bullets bury themselves in the walls. Some shatter what's left of the phone booth. Some fly wild. Proof of how hard it is to control automatic gunfire. But enough hit their target. More than enough. The shooting lasts maybe 5 seconds. 5 seconds that destroy the phone booth, end Coll's life, and stop one of the most violent gang wars in New York history. And silence. The ringing in everyone's ears from the gunfire slowly fades. The smell of gunpowder hangs thick in the air. Smoke drifts from the barrel of the Thompson. The gunman lowers his weapon. He looks at what he's done. The shattered phone booth. The body visible inside, the blood, satisfied. He puts the gun back under his coat. His partner, who has been watching the entrance, nods that it's clear. The two men turn and walk calmly toward the door. As they pass George Scott, who hasn't moved, who is still frozen behind the counter, his face completely white, the gunman raises a finger to his own lips. Shoo? It's almost playful. That gesture, a reminder that George Scott, if he wants to keep living, should forget everything he's seen tonight, should suddenly have trouble remembering faces, voices, details. The men leave the drugstore. They walk quickly, but they don't run. Running makes people notice. Within seconds, they're back in their limousine. The car pulls away from the curb, turns onto 8th Avenue, and disappears into the Manhattan night. Behind them, in the London chemist's drugstore, the phone booth door slowly swings open. Vincent Coll's body, full of bullets, falls forward. It hits the floor with a dull thud. Blood spreads fast on the white linoleum, flowing outward in dark streams. One of Vincent's hands is still holding the telephone receiver, pulled from the phone when he fell. The other hand is stretched out like he's reaching for something. Help, maybe, or mercy, or just a few more seconds of life. But there's no help coming. There's no mercy. And there are no more seconds. Vincent Mad Dog Coll, 23 years old, is dead. George Scott, the night clerk, stands behind the counter in shock for several seconds. Then training and instinct kick in. He picks up the phone and calls the police. There's been a shooting. London chemists. 314 West 23rd Street, I think. I think someone's dead. The nearest police officer, walking his beat, hears the shots and waves down a passing taxi. Follow that car. He shouts, pointing at the disappearing limousine. It's the kind of moment that seems like it belongs in a movie. But this is real life, real death, real consequences. The taxi gives chase, but the limousine has too big of a head start. It turns again, disappears into the maze of city streets. Within minutes, it's completely gone. The officer radios in about the chase, but he knows it's hopeless. The killers are gone. More police arrive at the drugstore within minutes. then detectives, then the medical examiner, then photographers. The drugstore becomes a crime scene, blocked off with ropes, filling up with men taking notes and measurements and photographs. The body of Vincent Coll is examined where it lies before being moved. The medical examiner counts the wounds, at least 15 separate bullet strikes, 3 to the head, 3 to the chest, 1 to the stomach, 8 more scattered across the arms and legs. Some bullets have gone through the body and are buried in the walls or floor. Others are still inside Vincent's body. The examiner notes that death was almost instant. The head wounds alone would have killed him. The chest wounds collapsed both lungs. There was no chance of survival, no possibility of medical help. Vincent was dead before his body hit the floor. George Scott gives a statement to the police. He describes the 2 gunmen, their height, their clothes, what they said. But when asked if he can identify them, if he got a good look at their faces, Scott suddenly becomes unsure. It all happened so fast. The lighting was dim. He can't be sure. The police know exactly what this means. Scott is terrified. He knows that if he identifies the killers, he's a dead man. Better to say he doesn't know. To be unhelpful. To protect himself, Vincent's bodyguard, who was in the front of the store during the shooting, also gives a statement. His version is equally unhelpful. He didn't see the gunmen's faces clearly. He can't identify them. He doesn't know anything about who might have ordered the killing. The investigation continues through the night and into the next day, but the outcome is already clear. This case will never be solved, not officially, anyway. Everyone in the criminal world knows who ordered the killing. Dutch Schultz, Oni Madden, or some combination of mob bosses who decided Vincent had to go. But knowing and proving are different things, without witnesses willing to testify, without physical evidence linking specific people to the crime. There's no case. The police file their reports. The district attorney looks at the evidence and decides that prosecution is impossible. The case is marked as unsolved, though nobody really believes it's unsolved. It's just unprovable. Vincent's body is taken to the morgue, examined, photographed, and prepared for burial. His wife, Lala, identifies the body, a terrible job for a woman who has been married just a few weeks. The body is released to the family for burial. Vincent Mad Dog Coll's funeral is held on February 11th, 1932. At a Catholic church in the Bronx. It's a small event, much smaller than might be expected for someone who was, for a short time, one of the most famous criminals in America. Lala Coll is there, dressed in black, her face hidden behind a veil. She's 23 years old and already a widow. Her entire marriage lasted less than a month. Most of it was spent in hiding, on the run, waiting for the bullet that finally came. A handful of Vincent's relatives attend, distant cousins, maybe, people who knew him as a child before he became Mad Dog. They sit in the pews and listen to the priest say the words, the ritual phrases about eternal rest and souls and mercy. But most of the people you'd expect to be there don't come. Vincent's gang members, what's left of them, stay away. Going to the funeral would mark them as friends of Vincent Coll, which would make them targets, better to mourn privately, if at all. The other major gangsters don't come either. Dutch Schultz certainly doesn't show up to brag, though he must be celebrating quietly. Oni Madden doesn't come. None of the major mob figures come. In the structured world of organized crime, going to Vincent's funeral would be seen as showing respect to a man who broke every rule, who killed children, who brought unnecessary attention down on everyone. The service is short. The priest says the prayers. The coffin is carried out to a hearse. The procession moves to St. Raymond's Cemetery in the Bronx, where Vincent is buried in a grave with no marker. A grave with no marker. Think about that. Vincent Coll, who wanted so badly to be someone, to matter, to be remembered, ends up in a grave with no marker, no headstone, no memorial. Just a piece of ground and a body underneath it, slowly returning to the earth years later. Lala Coll will marry again and move on with her life. She will die in 1985, having outlived her first husband by more than 50 years. In interviews late in her life, she says that Vincent was not the monster the newspapers made him out to be, that he was a victim of circumstances and bad press. Maybe she's right, or maybe she's changing history, letting memory soften the hard edges of truth. It's impossible to know, with Vincent Coll dead. Dutch Schultz has won. The war is over. Dutch's position as beer king of the Bronx is secure. The ways he makes money are protected. His reputation is intact. He showed that challenging him has consequences. Dutch celebrates his victory by expanding his operations. With his main enemy gone, he moves into new territories, opens new speakeasies, increases his profits. The early 1930s represent the high point of Dutch Schultz's power and wealth. But power in the criminal world is always temporary. In 1933, Prohibition is repealed with the ratification of the 21st Amendment. The legal alcohol trade returns, which destroys the bootlegging business overnight. Dutch has to adapt, moving into other rackets. Gambling, loan sharking, labor unions more dangerously. Dutch attracts the attention of federal prosecutor Thomas Dewey, who makes his name going after organized crime in New York. Dewey charges Dutch with tax evasion, the same charge that brought down Al Capone. Dutch goes on trial, and while he manages to avoid conviction by changing where the trial is held and having excellent lawyers, he knows that Dewey won't stop. Dutch makes a fatal mistake. He suggests killing Thomas Dewey. He brings this idea to the commission, the group that oversees organized crime in New York, which includes Lucky Luciano, Meyer Lansky, and other major bosses. Dutch argues that killing Dewey will solve the problem. The commission disagrees. Killing a federal prosecutor would bring incredible attention down on all organized crime operations. It's too risky, too damaging. The commission tells Dutch no. Dutch indicates he might do it anyway. This seals his fate. The commission decides that Dutch Schultz has become too much of a risk. On October 23, 1935, Dutch and 3 of his associates are shot at the Palace Chop House in Newark, New Jersey. Dutch dies the next day, age 33, just 10 years older than Vincent Coll was at his death. Dutch's last words, spoken while he was not thinking clearly as he lay dying in the hospital and recorded by a police stenographer, are confused and rambling, probably meaningless, but they include the phrase, "Mother is the best bet. Make of that what you will." So, Dutch Schultz, the beer king of the Bronx, the man who put a $50,000 reward on Vincent Coll's head, ends up dead just 3 years after Vincent. He wins the gang war, but loses his life anyway. In the criminal world, winning is often just a delayed death sentence. Oni Madden, the man most likely responsible for setting up Vincent Coll's death, does much better. Unlike Dutch Schultz or Vincent Coll, Madden understands when to get out. In 1932, shortly after Vincent's death, Madden is sent to prison on a minor charge. He serves his time quietly, gets released, and then makes a smart decision. He basically retires from the New York mob scene. In 1935, Madden moves to Hot Springs, Arkansas, a spa town that has become a popular place for gangsters to hide out and keep a low profile. Hot Springs is famously corrupt, with local officials willing to ignore things as long as the money keeps coming. It's perfect for a retired gangster. Madden lives in Hot Springs for the rest of his life. He owns a hotel, invests in local businesses, becomes a respected, or at least tolerated, member of the community. He gets married, settles down, and basically goes straight. Only Madden dies in 1965 at age 73. Old age, in bed, surrounded by comfort and money. It's the kind of death most gangsters dream of, but few achieve. He outlives Vincent Coll by 33 years, Dutch Schultz by 30 years, and most of his criminal contemporaries by decades. The lesson seems clear. In the criminal world, the ones who survive aren't necessarily the toughest or the most violent. They're the ones smart enough to know when to walk away. Vincent Mad Dog Coll lived only 23 years, and his criminal career lasted barely a decade. Yet his impact on American popular culture is much bigger than what might be expected from such a short, brutal life. The nickname Mad Dog alone ensures his place in gangster stories. It's perfect, short, powerful, memorable, suggesting both violence and craziness. Mad Dog Coll sounds like a character from a crime novel, which is probably why he's been featured in so many novels, movies, and TV shows over the years. In the 1960s, a low-budget movie called Mad Dog Coll was made with John Chandler playing Vincent. The movie takes a lot of liberties with the facts, but it captures the basic elements: the poverty, the violence, a quick rise, and brutal fall. Vincent has appeared as a character in many other films and TV shows about the Prohibition era. He's usually shown as a psychopath, a mad dog indeed, someone whose violence is sick rather than just business. This portrayal probably says more about how we like to imagine gangsters than about who Vincent actually was. The baby killer label has stayed with Vincent forever. Even today, nearly 100 years after his death, that's what most people know about him, if they know about him at all. He's the gangster who killed a child. Never mind that the shooting was probably an accident, that the intended target was someone else, that Vincent likely didn't personally pull the trigger. The story is too strong, too emotional, to be complicated by facts in some ways. Vincent Coll has become a warning story. He represents what happens when wanting more than you have goes beyond your abilities. When violence becomes a goal instead of a tool. When a criminal refuses to know his place in the order of things. He's the young newcomer who challenged the established powers and paid with his life. But there's also something almost admirable about Vincent's story, isn't there? Not the violence, not the killing, certainly not the death of Michael Vangali, but the refusal to accept his fate, the determination to rise above his circumstances, the boldness of an orphaned Irish immigrant kid deciding that he deserved more than poverty and powerlessness. Vincent Coll wanted to be somebody. He wanted to matter. He wanted to be remembered. And in that, at least, he succeeded. Nearly 100 years after his death, we're still talking about him, still telling his story, still fascinated by the short, violent life of Mad Dog Coll. Who was Vincent Coll really? Take away the newspaper headlines, the exaggerated stories, the myths. Who was the actual human being? The historical records give us facts. Birth in Ireland, coming to America, orphaned young, life in poverty, turning to crime, increasing violence, spectacular death. But facts don't capture personality, don't show the inner life of a person. We can guess some things from his actions. Vincent was clearly smart. His criminal operations, especially the kidnapping business, required planning and organization. He was charming enough to get people to join and lead a gang. He was brave to the point of being careless, willing to take risks that more careful criminals avoided. But he was also deeply hurt. How could he not be? His childhood was a list of terrible events. Mother's death, father's abandonment, loss of siblings, years in an institution. No one comes out of that kind of early life without scars. The violence that defined Vincent's career may have been, at its core, a reaction to that early hurt. When you've been hurt deeply and over, when you've been made to feel powerless and worthless, violence becomes a way of getting power back. Every act of violence is a statement. I matter. I'm not nothing. I can affect the world. This doesn't excuse Vincent's actions. Understanding isn't the same as forgiving. Vincent made choices. Terrible choices that hurt and killed innocent people. He's responsible for those choices. But understanding his background helps explain how a baby born in a small stone house in County Donegal becomes Mad Dog Coll, public enemy, baby killer, the most feared young gangster in America. Vincent was a product of his environment. Poverty, violence, the harsh social conditions of early 20th century immigrant life in New York. But he was also an individual who made choices. He chose crime over legal work, though legal chances were rare. He chose violence over talking. He chose to challenge Dutch Schultz rather than accept his place in the order of things. These choices led inevitably to that phone booth on West 23rd Street, to those 15 bullets, to that grave with no marker. Any discussion of Vincent Coll must include the victims, because while Vincent's story is dramatic and interesting, it was bought with other people's suffering. Michael Vangali was 5 years old. He was playing on the sidewalk on a summer afternoon. He was innocent, blameless, just a child in the wrong place at the wrong time. His death traumatized his family, his community, and the whole city of New York. He should have grown up, gone to school, fallen in love, had children of his own, lived a full life. Instead, he's a footnote in the Vincent Coll story, a sad statistic. The other children wounded in that shooting, Nicholas Benguivaga, Michael Amato, and the others, survived physically but carried those scars forever. What must it be like to grow up knowing that you were shot by gangsters when you were 4 years old? How does that shape how you see the world? And there were others. Vincent killed or was involved in killing many people during his short career. Some were gangsters themselves, men who knew the risks, who chose the criminal life. But others were innocent people who happened to be in the way. Witnesses who saw too much, civilians caught in the middle. Each of these deaths meant a life ended, a family destroyed, a hole torn in the fabric of human connection. Vincent may not have cared about these victims. By all accounts, he was basically unable to feel empathy. But they existed anyway. They mattered. When we tell the story of Vincent Mad Dog Coll, we must remember that it's not just his story. It's also the story of the people he hurt, the lives he destroyed, the suffering he caused. Vincent Coll didn't come from nowhere. He was created by a system, social, economic, political, that ground up poor immigrant children and spit out criminals. Think about the series of failures that led to Vincent becoming Mad Dog Coll, economic failure. The Coll family came to America looking for opportunity, but found only poverty. Tall Coll couldn't earn enough to support his family, even though he worked all the time. The economic system offered Irish immigrants the worst jobs at the lowest pay with no security. Social failure, discrimination against Irish people, was common in early 20th century America. No Irish need apply. Signs were a real thing. Irish immigrants were seen as drunks, criminals, and troublemakers. They were pushed to the edges of society. Family failure. When Anne Mary Coll died, there was no safety net. Tull Coll, unable to cope, left his children. There was no welfare system, no social services, no government help for a family in crisis. Institutional failure. The Catholic mission where Vincent was placed wasn't good enough. It was just a place to keep unwanted children, not a real home or family. Vincent came out of 3 years there harder, angrier, more damaged, educational failure. The schools Vincent went to kicked him out instead of helping him. They had no resources or methods for dealing with troubled children from traumatic backgrounds. Legal failure. By the time Vincent was a teenager committing crimes, the criminal justice system had no idea how to step in effectively. Arrest, short time in jail, release. The cycle kept going without dealing with the real causes. Each of these failures pushed Vincent further toward a criminal life. None of them alone might have been enough, but together they created a person who saw crime as the only real option. This doesn't let Vincent off the hook for his choices. He still made decisions. But it does suggest that Vincent Coll was, in some way, a predictable result of the system that made him. And how many other Vincent Colls were there? How many poor immigrant children in the 1910s and 1920s took similar paths? We remember Vincent because his story ended in a dramatic way, because the newspapers gave him a memorable nickname. But there were hundreds, probably thousands, of similar stories. Children damaged by poverty and trauma who turned to crime because no other path seemed open to them. Vincent Coll's criminal career happened at almost exactly the same time as Prohibition. He grew up just as the 18th Amendment took effect, learned crime during Prohibition's peak years, and died just a year before it ended. In this way, Vincent was one of Prohibition's children, a generation of young criminals for whom the illegal alcohol trade represented a huge opportunity. Prohibition created the modern gangster. Before 1920, organized crime existed, but it was relatively small time. Protection rackets, illegal gambling, prostitution. These crimes made money, but were limited in how much. Bootlegging changed everything. Suddenly, there were millions of dollars to be made. Criminal organizations grew from street gangs into sophisticated businesses with distribution networks, payrolls, and professional structures. Violence got worse because the stakes were so much higher. Young men like Vincent saw this and recognized the opportunity. Why work a factory job for pennies when you could make thousands running beer? Why accept poverty when crime offered wealth? The sad irony is that Prohibition started to improve American morals, instead created a whole criminal system. It paid for the rise of organized crime, corrupted law enforcement and politics, and made violence normal. The noble experiment was a huge failure that shaped American crime for decades. Vincent Coll was both someone who benefited from and was hurt by Prohibition. It gave him chances he never would have had otherwise, but it also created the violent world that eventually killed him. When Prohibition was ended in 1933, the bootlegging business disappeared overnight. Many gangsters successfully moved into other rackets. But one wonders if Vincent had lived just one more year, if he'd survived until Prohibition ended, would he have changed? Or would he have been one of those criminals who couldn't function without the unique chances Prohibition provided? We'll never know. Vincent died in the world Prohibition created, killed by the same violence that defined the era. Nearly 100 years after Vincent Coll's death, some questions remain that can't be answered. Did Vincent actually kill Michael Vangali? Legally, Vincent was found not guilty of the murder, but a not guilty verdict isn't the same as being innocent. The evidence suggests that Vincent set up the hit that went wrong. that he was in the car when the shooting happened. Whether he personally pulled the trigger isn't clear, and in some ways, it doesn't matter. He bears moral responsibility either way. Who exactly killed Vincent? We know it was a professional killing, almost certainly ordered by Dutch Schultz, possibly with Oni Madden's help. But who actually pulled the trigger? The identity of the gunman was never proven for sure. Theories exist. Some name specific Dutch Schultz enforcers. Others suggest it was someone hired from outside. The truth died with the people involved. Could Vincent have survived if he'd made different choices? This is maybe the most interesting question. If Vincent had stayed loyal to Dutch Schultz, he'd probably have lived longer, but would have stayed a helper, an employee instead of a boss. If he'd run away from New York after his trial, he might have survived, but would have lost everything he'd fought for. Was there any path that led to both survival and success? Probably not. In the world Vincent lived in, ambitious young criminals had two choices: accept your place in the order of things, or die trying to rise above it. Was Vincent a psychopath? Trying to diagnose someone from the past based on historical records is always iffy. But Vincent's behavior, the seeming lack of empathy, the casual violence, the risk-taking, suggests possible antisocial personality disorder. Or maybe he was just a product of extreme trauma in a violent environment. Nature versus nurture, the eternal question. Impossible to answer for sure. Did Vincent regret anything? We have no record of Vincent saying he was sorry for his actions. No final words admitting guilt. No moments of feeling bad. No apologies. Does this mean he felt nothing? Or that he just never had the chance or reason to express what he felt? We can't know what went through his mind as he lay dying on that drugstore floor. What can we learn from Vincent Coll's story? What lessons does his short, violent life offer? First, poverty and trauma create conditions for crime. Vincent's story shows how childhood circumstances shape adult outcomes. The broken family, the institutional care, the lack of opportunity, these weren't excuses for Vincent's later violence. But they were signs that it might happen. A society that fails to protect and care for its children shouldn't be surprised when some of those children grow into damaged, dangerous adults. Second, violence creates more violence. Vincent's life was defined by violence. Violence he experienced as a child. Violence he saw on the streets. Violence he committed as a young man. Violence that eventually killed him. Once this cycle starts, it's incredibly hard to break. Vincent never learned any other way of solving problems or achieving goals. Third, wanting more without wisdom is dangerous. Vincent wanted to rise, to succeed, to be someone. These aren't bad desires, but he went after his goals without thinking about consequences, without making allies, without developing the patience and strategic thinking needed for long-term success. He wanted everything right away, and his impatience helped destroy him. Fourth, in criminal life, there are no final wins. Dutch Schultz defeated Vincent Coll, but died himself 3 years later. The gangsters who survived were those who knew when to leave, who understood that power in the criminal world is always temporary. Vincent never learned this lesson. He fought until the end, and the end came quickly. Fifth, society remembers the dramatic, not the detailed. Vincent Coll, the person, the orphaned child, the damaged young man, the ambitious criminal, has been erased by Vincent Mad Dog Coll. The media creation, the nickname, the headlines, the myths have taken over from the reality. This is probably unavoidable. But it's worth noting that the Vincent Coll we know is mostly a construction. A story we tell ourselves about the nature of crime and violence. Sixth, Some lives are tragedies not because of single wrong turns, but because the whole path was wrong from the start. Vincent's life wasn't derailed at some specific point. It was heading toward disaster from early on. The death of his mother, the abandonment by his father, the years in the orphanage, these set him on a path that was always going to end badly. Not inevitably, people can overcome terrible circumstances. But most likely, Vincent's chances of a good life were never high. St. Raymond's Cemetery in the Bronx contains hundreds of thousands of graves, layer upon layer of New York's dead. Somewhere in this huge cemetery is an unmarked plot containing the remains of Vincent Coll. Unmarked because nobody paid for a headstone, or because the family wanted to avoid making the grave a target for vandals, or because Vincent in death, as in life, was abandoned. Forgotten by everyone except historians and true crime fans. The grave of Michael Vangali is also in a New York cemetery, Holy Cross Cemetery in Brooklyn. Unlike Vincent's, Michael's grave has a proper headstone. It bears his name, his dates 1926 to 1931, and probably some writing about angels and innocence and loss, 5 years old. Dead because he was playing on the wrong sidewalk on the wrong afternoon. These two graves, the gangster and his victim, represent the two sides of Vincent Coll's story. One grave contains a man who chose violence, who built his short life around crime and killing, who died at 23 after causing tremendous suffering. The other contains a child who had no choice, who was simply existing in the world when that world turned violent and senseless. If there's a moral to Vincent Coll's story, maybe it's found in these graves. They're not far apart, both in New York, both products of the same time and the same social conditions. But one grave represents what someone can become in the worst possible way, and the other represents a life cut short before it could even begin. Visitors to St. Raymond's Cemetery today won't find Vincent's grave. The location isn't marked on maps, and even if they searched, the unmarked plot offers nothing to find, but Michael Vangali's grave can be found. And sometimes, even 90 years later, someone leaves flowers there, small remembrances for a child who deserves to be more than just a note in someone else's story. February 8, 1932. That's the date everything ended for Vincent Mad Dog Coll. 23 years, 6 months, and 19 days after his birth in County Donegal, Ireland. 23 years, it's nothing. It's barely enough time to grow into adulthood, much less leave a lasting mark on the world. Most people at 23 are just starting their lives, finishing college, beginning careers, forming relationships that will shape their futures. Vincent Coll at 23 was dead, having lived a complete life squeezed into frantic, violent years. In those 23 years, he experienced more trauma, violence, and intensity than most people experience in 70 or 80 years. Orphaned at 7, abandoned by his father, lost 5 siblings, raised in institutions, turned to crime as a teenager, became an enforcer for one of New York's most powerful gangsters, started his own gang, went to war against his old boss, was involved in the death of a child, went on trial for murder, was found not guilty, lived with a $50,000 reward on his head, kept operating under impossible conditions, got married, and died in a phone booth. His body full of bullets. That's a lot of living, if you can call it living, packed into 23 years. The question that stays with Vincent Coll's story is the question of choice versus circumstances. How much of Vincent's life was chosen, and how much was decided by forces beyond his control? He was born into poverty, not his choice. His mother died when he was 7. Not his choice. His father left the family. Not his choice. He was put in an institution. Not his choice. He lived in a society that discriminated against Irish immigrants and offered few real chances to poor children. Not his choice. But at some point, choice does enter the picture. Vincent chose crime. He chose violence. He chose to challenge Dutch Schultz. He chose to keep fighting even when the smart decision was to run or give up. These were decisions, and Vincent is responsible for them. Maybe the most accurate way to understand Vincent's life is as a series of limited choices. His circumstances severely limited his options. But within those limits, he made decisions that shaped his fate. He could have been a different kind of criminal. Less violent, more strategic, more patient. He could have stayed loyal to Dutch Schultz. He could have left New York after his trial. He didn't. He chose to be exactly who he was. Violent, ambitious, careless, defiant. And those choices led without question to West 23rd Street, to that phone booth, to those 15 bullets. Vincent Coll died in 1932. But Mad Dog Coll lives on. He lives on in movies and books, in documentaries and podcasts, in Wikipedia articles and true crime forums. He lives on as a warning story, as a symbol of Prohibition-era violence, as a name that means something to anyone interested in gangster history. He lives on in the phrase, Mad Dog, used to describe violent criminals. Rabid animals, anything dangerous and out of control. The nickname has become bigger than the man. A cultural reference that most people recognize, even if they've never heard of Vincent Coll. He lives on in the memories of his crimes, especially the Harlem baby shooting, which even 90 years later remains one of the most famous incidents of gang violence in American history. Every time someone tells that story, Vincent Coll comes back to life briefly, replaying that terrible afternoon. But does the real Vincent Coll live on? The actual person, not the myth? Probably not. The real Vincent. The orphaned boy, the damaged young man, the ambitious criminal trying to make something of himself in the only way he knew how. Was lost, buried under layers of newspaper exaggeration, buried under decades of myth-making, buried in that unmarked grave in SD, Raymond Cemetery. What we have instead is the story, a story. The dramatic shape of rise and fall that seems almost too perfectly put together to be real life. Poor Irish immigrant boy becomes feared gangster, becomes public enemy, becomes corpse on a drugstore floor. It's the kind of story that works perfectly as a movie or a book or a long video. But it was real. It happened. Vincent Coll was a real person who really lived and really died. The people he hurt were real. The blood on that drugstore floor was real. The grief of Michael Vangali's parents was real. History has a way of smoothing down the rough edges of stories, making them smoother and easier to consume as entertainment. We forget that behind the exciting stories are real suffering, real pain, real lives destroyed. Vincent Coll's story is exciting. There's no denying that. The violence, the ambition, the drama of his gang war with Dutch Schultz, the famous nickname, the spectacular death. It has all the elements of great storytelling, but it's also tragic. A child born in poverty, damaged by trauma, shaped by a violent environment, who never learned any path except violence, and who died before he was old enough to even possibly change direction. That's the real story, not the exciting gangster tale, but the tragedy of wasted potential and violence that could have been prevented. In all the historical records, in all the newspaper stories, in all the police reports and trial papers, there's very little about what Vincent Coll actually wanted. What were his goals, his dreams, his vision for his life? We can guess from his actions. He wanted money. His criminal operations were focused on making money. He wanted power. His challenge to Dutch Schultz was basically about refusing to be below anyone. He wanted respect, or at least fear, which in the criminal world often serves the same purpose. But what did he really want, deep down? What was Vincent Coll trying to achieve? Maybe he wanted to matter, to be someone, to prove that a poor Irish immigrant orphan could rise to importance, could make the world notice his existence. If that's true, he succeeded. 90 years after his death, we're still talking about him. His name is still remembered. His story is still told. He mattered, but at what cost? He achieved a kind of immortality, but only through violence and bad fame. He's remembered, but as a monster, as a warning story, as Mad Dog rather than Vincent. Is that better than being forgotten completely? Is being famous for bad things better than no fame at all? Maybe Vincent would have thought so. Maybe if he could look back on his life and what he left behind, he'd be satisfied that people still tell his story, that the poor boy from Guidor made such an impression on New York, that the city couldn't forget him even if it wanted to. Or maybe in some other universe where Vincent Coll survived past 23, where he lived long enough to think about his life and choices, he would have regretted it all, would have wished he'd chosen differently, would have understood that fame built on violence is empty, that being known for bad things isn't the same as being respected, that being feared isn't the same as being valued. We'll never know. Vincent died too young to gain wisdom, too young to reflect, too young to become anything other than what his circumstances made him. So this is the complete story of Vincent Mad Dog Coll. From a small stone house in County Donegal to a blood-soaked drugstore floor in Manhattan. From Union to Mad Dog, from infant to enforcer to gang leader to corpse. 23 years squeezed into a story that includes immigration, poverty, trauma, crime, violence, ambition, war, death, and legacy. It's a story that tells us something about America in the early 20th century, about how we treated immigrants, about the conditions that created criminals, about the violence of Prohibition, about the nature of ambition and hierarchy in criminal organizations. It's a story that tells us something about human nature, about how trauma shapes us, about the choices we make within limited circumstances, about the costs of violence, about the hunger to be important that drives people to do extraordinary and terrible things. It's a story that tells us something about storytelling itself, about how real lives get turned into myths, about how nicknames and headlines can cover up reality, about how history remembers some people and forgets others. But most of all, it's Vincent's story. However we understand it, however we judge it, however we make sense of it, it's the story of a real person who lived and died in New York City between 1908 and 1932. Vincent Mad Dog Coll wanted to be somebody. He succeeded, whether that success was worth the price. 15 bullets in a phone booth, a grave with no marker, eternal bad fame is a baby killer, is a question each of us must answer for ourselves. And that's the complete story of Vincent Mad Dog Coll. From his birth in the poorest corner of Ireland to his violent death in a Manhattan drugstore, 23 years of life squeezed into a tale of poverty, crime, ambition, and unavoidable tragedy. Was he a product of his environment? A victim of poverty, trauma, and a society that failed its most vulnerable children? Or was he simply born with something broken inside, something that no amount of care could have fixed? Was he a monster who deserved his fate, or a damaged young man who never had a chance to be anything other than what he became? The truth, as always, is probably somewhere in between. Vincent Coll was both victim and victimizer, both shaped by his circumstances and responsible for his choices. He was a real person, complex and contradictory, not easily reduced to either hero or villain. What we can say for sure is this: his story matters, not because he was good or noble or admirable, but because his life shows important truths about poverty, crime, violence, and the American experience. His story is a window into a specific time and place, Prohibition-era New York. But it resonates beyond that time because the themes are universal. Every society creates its outcasts, its criminals, its Vincent Colls. Every generation produces damaged young people who turn to violence because no other path seems available. Every era has its gangsters, its gang wars, its innocent victims caught in the middle. Understanding Vincent Coll's story doesn't mean excusing his actions. It means recognizing the complex web of factors that create violent criminals, and maybe, hopefully, using that understanding to prevent future tragedies. Michael Vangali should have lived. Vincent Coll should have had better options than crime. The system that created both tragedies should have been different. These are the real lessons of Mad Dog Coll's story, not the exciting details of gang warfare and Tommy gun shootouts, but the underlying tragedy of lives wasted, potential thrown away, and violence continuing across generations. Vincent Mad Dog Coll, born July 20th, 1908, died February 8th, 1932. 23 years, one heck of a story, and ultimately, a tragedy. And that's the complete story of Vincent Mad Dog Coll. From Irish immigrant to the most feared young gangster in America. Dead at just 23. If you enjoyed this deep dive, you'll love my other videos. Check one out next. Subscribe for more long-form gangster stories perfect for sleep or deep looks into history. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.